Okay, so hi, welcome to Blue. Uh, it's another week, another new color, and another rainbow from another vantage. You guys want to check in a bit, like how you're doing? Maybe that contributes to the room, the space, since it's blue. What are the sessions like? Kara has moved to another place in the world, so maybe the session might be different. Becca, I haven't heard from you in a while. Have you been doing journeys? And what's the state of them?
Yeah, it's been great. Um, there's been a lot of going back and forth. Like the last session I had, I felt like I had done so many that were holding the space. And so I went back into holding it in time and much more heavy rhythms. But it was also a different time slot schedule than I usually do. It was late at night. So it was really interesting because people had very different experiences than what they had been having. But it felt like it was needed and balanced, and it was the night before the election here in the U.S., so it was also needed to come into balance with everything going on. But yeah, some
Mm,
really profound shifts in participants, and I think I had been holding so many sessions in deep space. And so
mm,
it was time to kind of go back to the basics
mm,
and hold something that was much more energized.
mm,
So that because I was feeling like it needed to
mm,
come back the other way, and so you could stretch in both directions.
mm. People need it. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
like the polarization that
Yeah,
brings about the unity, as opposed to hiding the fact that things are so polarized and dynamic there. It needs to
yeah,
talk to each other almost,
yeah,
the two
absolutely.
parts. Yeah. So I would be
Mm-hmm.
really interested to observe the process in the US over the next week, the next months, the next years. I would love to understand what's going to be happening in people's bodies between even just the masculine, the feminine, form and flow, time and space. All right, so welcome to the blue. I think we have some quorum, seven of us, and probably more would be joining in. Hope you're well. There's a lot happening uh, globally in the energy work, special projects. Things are changing. Um, I think one of the big ones that was interesting to brought up last week was it's this noise app. This needs to be conversed because some of us might be using this in this form. The old noise app is what's familiar to us, and when this is released in the world, it's going to be a big change because when Becca does talk about holding things in space, practice wise, it means this noise app. And there's a problematic with the fact that in App Store, my, it's, my noise is really just available in this new version, and you can't do simultaneous sounds in the new app. So this might be irrelevant for those who were able to download the app. But I realized there are some people within our trainings who didn't actually download this, and they took their time and not just the fact that it's going to affect those, but it's going to affect those who would be doing trainings because what you now understand is space won't be so relatable for people who wouldn't be able to access this. So with that, we would maybe study possible avenues, like working with a website would be one. But I think this would offer opportunities for the inner dance community to come into all other alternatives. Um, I, I was looking at this app, for example, yesterday, and I was sampling different files that are being recorded by Francois, who was here, who's working with modular systems. And there are more advanced ways of working with space. It's not dependent just on the noise app. So you may have to release some of our attachment to the noise app for those of us who are doing trainings, because this is not accessible anymore, not in its original form, where space and inner dance grew. That is now dimensionally an experience. So when Becca talks about space, it's afforded by a particular system. And I think us learning these systems would transform and transition the inner dance and Kundalini and whatever else people would call it into different forms. And I think that would be a good conversation within inner dance in the blue. So let's just go ahead into probably one of the most complex colors to bring up. The blue scares me. What is the blue? Okay, is it? Wait, am I sharing my screen? You guys can see my screen. Yeah, you can
Yes.
see my screen.
Yes.
All right. The color scares me because of just how complex it is. It's so hard to touch. It's what is the blue anyway? Is it language? Is it sharing? Is it media? Is it dimensionality? Um, okay, I want to start with the blue stone, which is a mythological object that is constant in the inner dance. It didn't just come up in my own inner dance processes or experiences. It came up in many um, inner dance journeys across time. It sometimes people would see the blue crystal, the blue stone, and there was this very constant messaging that came with it, and it had something to do with um, as soon as you receive it, whatever it is, you have to give it away. You can't hold it. So I guess there's a metaphor there. So we could imagine in a sensory way, like what it could mean. Like as soon as you receive a blue crystal, do you hold it tight in the palm of your hands? So there's something about inner dance, which has now different names, that when people experience it, there's this natural tendency for you want to give it away. So that's the reason why these facilitator trainings, these teacher trainings are so popular beyond inner dance. It's like, and people experience yoga, breath work. They also want to give it away. But there's something about inner dance that is so strong that when people, even at the point of experiencing it, they're already thinking about people they want to share it to. I don't know if you relate to this, but when you're in depth, you're thinking, okay, wow, yeah, like if only like my mom or my sister, my friend, my daughter could experience this. It seems to belong to the process itself. So there is a blue crystal energy. For some, it might seem like green, yeah, that which you receive, you must give to the others. Uh, but it somehow is in language unto itself, that as you hear something, you're already speaking it in a different way. You're translating it. So this for me is a very, very important topic. Um, I want to explain why I hold it in the way that I do. Like for me, the blue crystal is very much about understanding the nature of the gift that we are coming into the gifting. Let me just open my other. We're shifting into a gift culture, and um, inner dance has always been something that I myself could control. That if I decided not to follow the blue crystal's messaging, then as soon as I receive it, I would give it away, but in a way that isn't coming from generosity, isn't coming from flow. I would sell it. I would make it like a product. Uh, and in a way, I would try to control it. Okay, try to make it about status and power and money. Um, but because I received it as a gift, and there was something quite strong about the blue crystal message. I was so clear that as I gave it away, I couldn't control it after that gifting. So um, part of the instructions were uh, okay, I can't control it. When you think about all these amazing groups or systems in the world, I want to talk about systems today, like the United Nations, uh, the European Union. To control the earth, you need to organize, you need to spend a lot of resources, you need to organize people. So there's an issue here around control. Like, what is in control? And what does it mean to try to control something? So this is the reason why uh, I, I didn't really become concerned when people started to rename the inner dance, because that was part of the bluestone instructions, like don't control it, actually let people do with it as they see flowing through them. The instructions was, instead of controlling it, like watch it, see what happens. And in that process of observation, there's something to learn that would be very key around uh, humanity. You know, we would understand something about ourselves if there was this element of control that I had based in very early on. And if I tried to do it now, if I start doing it now, and there are often messages coming into my inbox, why can you control this? There are people abusing the energy, like creating confusion. I understand where it's coming from, these messages, but if I veer away from the original, uh, like source code of the inner dance, I would have to retract all the years of watching it. Okay, so there's a huge difference here in relation to the energy, either as a methodology, something that we're doing. So that is easy enough to try to control and box in. When you are conducting a training, you need certain constant variables that are unchanging across time. You know, things would stay the same the year after, so that when people do a training, they can expect that training certified wouldn't shift too much away. So that would be very, very different from the energy as a sentient, intelligent being that is alive. And sentience, aliveness, intelligence would mean that it would be changing. It would not be the same tomorrow as compared to today. Maybe even in the next hour, it's different. And every time you do an inner dance, because the process or the method is one of transformation, then you cannot expect it to be static. You wouldn't expect it to stay the same. So I'm very careful that when I conduct the training, that people don't get stuck with it as a method, because then I would get stuck and the process itself would get stuck. I think it would be interesting to study language as well in this way. Like, language is it a methodology? Is it a channel of communication? There's some understanding in inner dance that language itself is a sentient, intelligent being, and that normally when we think of language, it's something that we speak. We speak language, but in the inner dance, when the body begins to move, which is in a sense communicating, language isn't something we speak. Language, in a way, speaks us, right? We are not older than the language that we use. In a way, human beings, like other beings, are there for what is inside the beings. Okay, so I am respectful and in love with people, but I am not always as interested in the people themselves as I am interested in what is in the people. So we make these reference, like the it, like what is speaking to us that is not exactly us, that might even be using us, like something much, much bigger. So let's come to understand what that could be like, not just as a concept, but as a systematicity. Because that unto itself, if language speaks us, and if language is a sentient being, language is not static. Language would also be growing. There is evolution there. So when we study aspects of language, when society had tried to control language, like what is language anyway? And there are different characteristics of language that isn't just speech. There's computer language, there's body language, there's emotional language, there's music as language. But in terms of verbal language, the evolutionary space in translation theory is very, very evident. And it's a very well-known fact in anthropology that when you try to control a language, just as the French did a century ago, when they were noticing the English language starting to influence the French language, the moment you control a language, when a language stops evolving, a language is already, in a sense, dying. It is already a culture that stays stagnant, that it's not growing, it's already dying. So in a way, inner dance unto itself constitutes an accelerated growth of language itself. If language wasn't just the words, but language was in fact um, feedback. Okay, let's try to think about what is feedback, because inner dance definitely is a feedback mechanism. It's like suddenly we are receiving the message. And it is the age of feedback, like feed, especially feed. We are in the society of social media, uh, AI, uh, like we own a hybrid car, and I press the, I don't know what you call that, to open the door, and the lock would just open just as I press the door, as long as the key is inside my pocket. I have my AirPods on when I'm having a foot massage, listening to Spotify, and as soon as someone sends me a text message, I would get a notification. So we are in the age of instantaneous feedback, and people are eating it feedback. They're eating again and again. There's a feedback loop that is now taking place in the in media process. And if inner dance was a type of media, if Kundalini is a type of media, then we will want to understand how that feedback process is happening. So just to let go of this first slide, like the gifting culture is something that would affect the feedback process. I would want to understand, how do you give the gift freely without restriction? How do you truly gift yourself and that which flows through you? I don't know if you remember this amazing movie. Uh, not paid forward. How do you uh, give in advance what would cancel out indebtedness and obligation, and uh, like the opposite of the gift is debt. Like this idea that I owe the government, I owe God, I owe my mom, I owe my dad, I owe society. So inner dance, we will try to define inner dance as that which pays off the debt. That there's a systematicity in inner dance that actually pays off. Oops, where did it go? Pays off the debt, and debt is the mode of suffering that, in fact, is the invisible factor that plays out in elections and power structures and economics, even in education systems. How does inner dance, in fact, like liberate us from indebtedness? Is this maybe what we're doing by asking people to lay down and closing their eyes? Are they really just listening to music, or are we liberating them somehow from something quite dense? And the idea of the loop means it just keeps going around in circles. That sense of indebtedness has been there for forever. Like in my culture, in religion, there's this idea of original sin. And because this guy supposedly thousands of years ago because he ate the apple from the tree of knowledge and the tree of wisdom and the tree of good and evil and the tree of life, then we have to pay off that debt. We're obliged because we are sinners, and unless we do so, we would go down instead of go up. So I think these stories are still playing out, even in politics. People don't understand how family systems, religious systems, and social systems are actually intertwining into each other. And it's not easy to break that loop. And somehow inner dance begins there anyway. And it might need to be looked at again, how we could uh, break out of debt. Like, do you really owe anyone? So until that moment, you don't owe anyone, you would not really be able to truly gift something freely. Okay, so let's go back to all right. So the question is, what is organizing all of it? Okay, so I talk about inner dance. I didn't organize inner dance. Now, in the first years, when people saw inner dance, they're like, wow, Pi, that looks really, really messy. That looks like the messiest thing I've ever seen. People screaming, people crying, people laughing, bodies moving, running around. It looked like an insane asylum. Uh, but people trusted it, that somehow it's all organizing. It's all organized, that the more you disorganize, the more it's actually organized. So I don't organize inner dance in a certain way. I'm very, very organized, as many of you well know now. But the way I organize is usually following certain principles. Like one of the first principles is there's only one thing, even though there seems to be all these many things. Everything that I do needs to be a one thing. Okay. And that one thing is not a simple thing. It actually is the most complex thing, but because it's only one thing, uh, it's okay because um, that one thing holds everything. Okay. So that one thing, number one, has to be naturally occurring. If it's something that I need to control, then that's going to take effort. It's expensive, and I need to maintain that. It's going to run the hamster wheel. It doesn't go anywhere. It's coming out of maintenance, and the reason why I lived in solitude in nature to undergo a healing process is I wanted to naturally occur, like myself. I didn't want to maintain myself in a modern environment where I'm going to work just to uh, make things seemingly work when it's not actually working. So I brought up this image to look at the forest system. I mean, who manages the forest anyway? I think that's the question. And I want to really uh, emphasize the fact that even though wait, no one organized inner dance, it still organized itself. Okay. Whatever you call it, whatever name people call it, how is it that what started with one body became two bodies, became 10 bodies, now are so many bodies experiencing similar manifestations, that when you see that movement anywhere in the world moving the way it does, whether it be an Instagram, whether it be in an actual physical space, you know what it looks like. You can recognize it. So inner dance spread out. And even as there was quantity, there was something about the quality that was retained. Even if people didn't understand, we're not given instructions, even with the absence of context. That naturally occurring one thing, nonetheless, is resonating. We might say transmitting, but that would mean we are giving it to others. If we're giving it to others, it means that they don't already have it inside themselves. So I would more emphasize that inner dance is already existing. It's a potent, existent thing inside the body, waiting to not be taught, but to remind it. Okay. To activate it is an okay word in this way, more than transmission. Um, so okay, all of that is kind of interesting and kind of obvious, but what I would be interested in for a lot of people who are having more and more troubles living in a media frenzy, resource rich, information dense environment, how do you manage your life? It's not one thing, like you get out of bed and how many things do you need to worry about? How many things are in your schedule, your to-do list? Um, so that could be like an action process. It could also be a perception, like a mode of seeing. Everything is really just one thing, and you'd find yourself doing everything that needs to be done. Um, so going back to this, I don't know if you know permaculture, which is a system that grew out of Australia that inspires the world to think about how forest systems brings about the idea of not just permanent agriculture, but permanent culture, ancient cultures that are uh, based on how nature works and not just how humans would want to work nature. Okay. So control then would be a subject in blue, Why is that? Um, so let's study language. If we studied language, where would we go? Where would we start? Okay, like do we start from the anthropocentric point of view? The anthropo model would be that man is in the middle. The theocentric would be God is the determining factor. Man is the determinant, and logocentric would be language itself is in control. So in the Greek philosophy, and many people who study language in school, uh, probably because that's how we experience it, language would initially be studied in the domain of the rhetoric. This at least was my entry point in language. I studied marketing. I went to an Opus Dei university in Manila, and the curriculum was from the humanities. So we always started out from Greek philosophy into the age of reason, into modern ways or theories of understanding the mind, language. So rhetoric would be an initial starting point in Aristotle, uh, primarily, like how you might manipulate or um, convince by speaking really, really well, whether it be in an Instagram post, whether it be verbal or in an image. I think this hasn't gone away. Like very much our experience of language is rhetorical. Like the better you express yourself, then you get what you want. You would achieve what you need. You would achieve success. But because we didn't stay here, there were many turns, and language is very much so studied right now with psychology. To understand one, you would need to understand each other. We would need to look at the different turns, and we could look at it today. We could look at it in the long term. Um, they're embedded, so we can't avoid it. Uh, there are many turns. There's the psychoanalytic turn, this idea of the unconscious. There's the behaviorist turn. There was the linguistic turn. This is when we started to see the structuralism in language that wasn't so visible. There's a formalist turn. The last 2 weeks ago, we went into the hermeneutic turn. And then there was a cognitivism, understanding how cognition works when you bring all these together. There's a structuralist turn. There's even the computationalist turn, which would probably be the least interesting in the inner dance process. There's the neurological turn, the neuro turn. There's also the constructivist turn, and so on and so forth. Today, we would probably look at the turn of plasticity, the turn into post, and the turn into meta. I think what would be interesting today, inner dance has much to say about all these turns. But today, as a grand starting point, it could hold all these turns. There's also the turn into the multi, or it could be the trans or the inter. Multi might be apt. So meaning like how to hold multiple systems that are speaking to each other, um, informing each other. They could be fighting each other. They could be competing with each other, but they could also be working with each other. So in this way, when I think about inner dance as something I didn't control. So even when concepts such as Kundalini arises out of the inner dance construct and starts to take over the narrative, I don't fight that, because that is also a naturally occurring phenomenon. So rather than having Kundalini cancel out inner dance or inner dance cancels out Kundalini, there's something about the cross sectioning. There's something about the conversation, the languaging process between these two frames that would present something bigger than either or. Okay, I'm not here just to champion inner dance. That was really just a term, and it's a movement. I'm not here to decenter Kundalini. I'm looking for what is bigger. I think that would be a greater healing process. So I'm not here to have another set of elections. Okay, who's going to be the president? Who's going to win? I'm not interested in that. So studying language in this way might allow us to hold a multiplicity of dimensions, of terminologies, of paradigms that might be more helpful in today's um, complex environment. All right, so moving on. Okay, so just like inner dance didn't need the General Assembly. This is the headquarters of the United Nations, right? And I often would think about, like, the inner dance is like the UN. It's like, okay, when you go into that dream space, when you do go into the inner dance experience, the dream, the REM state conscious space, let's call that the dream. Um, I feel that's sort of like a UN General Assembly meeting. I feel somehow that's like a meeting, like a gathering, a General Assembly. Okay, it could be a meeting of let's say, in Asia we would have the ASEAN group of nations, have maybe the European Union, have NATO, have BRICS, you have the UN, and so on and so forth. I feel that the inner dance is actually like everyone in the world meeting inside this weird dream room. And in that meeting, we are all of us, we're all there. Like, okay, I'm here. Is everyone here? Like, everyone's here. Let's all have a meeting. And that is a very interesting meeting. It's very hard to take something from that meeting because everyone has something to say. And we develop this ear that can suddenly all at once hear what everyone is saying. Is it possible to have that meeting? And what would be the productivity? What would be the product? What would be the outcome of that meeting? Okay. I mean, that is why we are meeting right now. We are also having that meeting within another kind of inner dance space. We are not laying down. We're not looking at everything all at once. We are outlining, we're making clear what does everyone have to say. So when you do study inner dance's curriculum, you can see that we are having some kind of conversation, but it's not about the people. It's not about these people who are gathered there. It's what these people represents. You might understand now what I might mean about it's not about the people. And when it becomes about the people, when it becomes about the candidate, when it becomes about the voters, something's lost. It's like, okay, what is it about? What's the point? At that point that we make it about the person, about that one leader, there's something very disempowering. We make it about that guru, that teacher, that healer. We make it very disempowering because then the leadership, the the power structure collapses onto something externally systemic. So when we hear these words, for example, like the awakening process, um, and then we see people expressing after having gone through an awakening process, and still, like when I watch all these post-election videos in the US, like going into blame systems and why she didn't win. Uh, One of the possible reasonings why a Donald Trump might dominate over a Harris is uh, there's this word that gets spoken rather too much, too loud, too often, like woke. People are too woke in this righteous version of woke. There might be some contribution coming out of the awakening process if we were to observe it from a detached point of view. I get confused when I hear this sentence, I am awake. Like, how do you know who is more awake than others? And people who hear woke people, there's something in them that gets turned off because somehow it elicits this message that, okay, does that mean that I am not woke? That I am sleeping? I am stupid? I am less? Um, for me, um, there's always this that is stating that I am the one that's awake. In a way, we have to ask when there is an awakening, what is waking up? Like what or who? Um, when we go into the blue, there would be a dichotomy. It's a choice point, like in terms of who is speaking or what is speaking, depending on what pathway you decide to enter into, this would determine what would be the structuralism. Would it be rhetorical or would it be something a lot more meta or multi? So for me, there's always only been one answer to what is awakening, and it had always been the system. The system itself is waking up. It doesn't seem like it when we watch the news, but when I perceive things from the consciousness that is inner dance, the experience that is inner dance, this had always been it. Like when I went into this path, it's because I saw that the system is waking up. The I am actually going to bed, going more into a dream state, going less into the wake state, going less into the woke. Uh, that which has been through an awakening is woke. Uh, the I is actually going to sleep a lot more, and the the system itself is that which is waking up. So there doesn't need to be a dichotomy between these. And I think that's what we're working on. Like the I and the system could both be waking up, but in a sense, for there to be a true systemical awakening, uh, the bunch of eyes that are going into this competitive, battleground between the left, the right, the red and the blue, the high and the low, the masculine and the feminine. There has to be something deeper. There has to be something more, and needs to start with every single one. Okay, like if we see a leader who can demonstrate that and inspire that in everyone, then it's going to work out. Until that time, uh, I'm not sure how to present this word not just within secretive yoga spaces where sessions are happening. Uh, it- when we bring this into the media, when we bring this into institutions, how would this word hold not just power but also systematicity? So I want to introduce us to. Um, okay, you may not have heard this term before. I have not brought up this term before. The term has been there around inner dance, but I have not had the space to bring it up before. And some of you have probably heard about cybernetics. Um, it's a movement, I feel, that predates inner dance. And there are many notes in cybernetics that would be interesting for you to look at if you were interested in what comes before inner dance that was also inner dance. That could be more of the study of inner dance. So let's go into the wiki. Cybernetics. Okay, let's approach it slowly. There's some complexity here. Starting with these words. Um, Definitions. Okay. Early definition in the music conferences: study of circular causal and feedback mechanisms in biological and social systems. Let's jot these down. Cybernetics is not such a big word anymore. It's seen its demise, and there are new forms that come after it that antedate it. So, what were those words? Circular causal feedback. Circular causal and feedback. Let's maintain this particular slide so we can go back to it. And then biological and social. So let's put emphasis on feedback. So let's go back to what it is. Margaret Mead emphasized the role of cybernetics as a form of cross-disciplinary thought, which made it possible for members of many disciplines to communicate with each other easily in a language which all could understand. All right, so cross-disciplinary. The person who wrote the biggest book in inner dance, his name is Dr. Peter Riksha. And I would go back to his book because he mentioned cybernetics. Not only is he someone who studied cybernetics, he in fact worked with some of the names that you would find here, such as Gregory Bateson would be one of the most interesting names. But he had already observed, Peter had already been observing many years ago, maybe way back in 2017 or 18, that inner dance was a kind of cybernetics. And cybernetics, inner dance, and some other possible frames are candidates for being what would be called a TOE, or a theory of everything. That's quite a big claim, that inner dance could be a DOE. But for those in this 12-month course, you might now nod your head and say, no, maybe, yeah, I don't know, could be. And this is before we had really dived as deep as we are now. So he saw it beforehand because of his um, uh, sojourns into cybernetics and uh, all kinds of whole systems, all kinds of whole systems. Uh, so this is key, I would guess. And the philosophy that we would be covering in the blue now and in the long term would be this. It's structuralism. And structuralism could be defined as this cross-disciplinarity between uh, the study of the psychology, anthropology, the neurosciences, uh, and philosophy, and what else is there? Information systems, information processing systems, and what else is there? Yeah, even the biological, the sociological. When these come together, a kind of structuralism takes place. And inner dance is studying this because of the amount of change happening throughout all of these, because there are transformations. The transformations are informing us as to what is changing. So that's where cybernetics comes back into the fore. This is to say, this is important to state that when cybernetics was coming up, it initially was very interesting for top level scientists, but later on it didn't survive primarily because an inner dance would be subject to this. It was observed as a non-empirical pseudoscience. It didn't end up in the academe as a modality of universe study. You know, there were these important conferences attended by some of the most respected whole systems thinkers, but uh, there was a huge resistance. It was it went through several waves, a first, a second, and also a third wave. Um, but what would be interesting is that there are certain terminologies that did come out of cybernetics that are still in usage today, are in fact quite relevant and hold huge spaces in political theory, social systems theory, biological systems theory. And taking up these terminologies would bring some explanations as to what inner dance is in a structure and not just as a flow. Um, so one thing that is embedded or implied in cybernetics is the theory of chaos and complexity. And when you do bring up chaos, you would also study the process of simplification. Christina, you're unmuted, so we can hear you talking to the cat or something. All right, so that's going to be part of our blue process today. As I mentioned, it's an early attempt at structuralism, and inner dance is a current approach into a kind of structuralism coming from a post-structuralism, but also a restructuralism of Buddhist post. Cybernetics is transdisciplinary, and it's also interested in feedback loops because inner dance provides feedbacks between senders, receivers, channels, messages, contexts, codes, because social media is also intensifying feedbacks. Then it might be time to go back to a new cybernetics. And I'm glad we're able to bring it up within an inner dance space. So one terminology that does come out of cybernetics is autopoiesis. I am guessing most of you have not heard this before. So Dr. Peter's book mentions this. Let's look this up. To it is worth it to learn new terms sometimes. So it comes from the Greek, which means, which is a composite of the word self and creation or production. A lot of people confuse the word autopoiesis to be that which is self-governing. It's more to do with systems that are capable of producing and maintaining itself by creating its own parts. You can imagine why this would be an inner dance concept. I wasn't really laying down with my eyes closed when I lived in the islands on a coconut diet, but I was definitely coming out of the experience where everything I need is already inside me. I don't need to consume stuff that I would buy from a store or produced by another factory. So auto or self poiesis uh, is about self-generativity. I think this is what the world needs to be working on. That is facilitated by inner dance. We're not just laying down. We are finding out how energy can generate from inside. So autopoiesis is definitely an appropriate term for how we are learning to do this. So Humberto Maturana, a biologist who sounds like a philosopher when you hear him speak, and Francisco Varela initially brought this up in the domain of biology to understand how our cells has a self-maintenance capacity to achieve life. But later on, this would in cybernetics and then beyond be applied to cognition, would be the psychological, into the cognitive sciences, in neurosciences, systems theory, architecture, and sociology. And would love to look at this German sociologist's thought process. His name's Niklas Luhmann. I want to bring him up today. I don't want to go so much into Marshall McLuhan today because his media theory, which is also a political and systems theory, provides us with more ideas than McLuhan might in terms of what it means to achieve an autopoietic space or function. Like how do you how do you become sovereign? How do you how do you organize yourself? It still goes back to that forest system. How are you a forest unto yourself? How are you a universe unto yourself? How are you complete? How is it that you don't actually need anything from outside? The opposite of allopoiesis, autopoiesis is allopoietic, allopoiesis. So, for example, if you have, let's say, a car, this would be an example given often. The process of producing this car is allopoietic because you need other factories to produce the parts that would then create this other part. So there's this dependency on the outside in order to achieve the totality of this car. Now, in a sense, inner dance is autopoietic. And depending on where you're looking at it from, it could be allopoietic. There's a healer who works on the that allows for the healing to happen. Like people aren't just alone in the room healing themselves. So there needs to be steps taken backwards in order to see that, okay, there's a greater autopoietic space that combines the spaces of the inside and the outside that makes them one. Okay, so what is that relationship, and what can we glean from uh, the autonomic nervous system's autopoietic function? Okay, so we would bring up the the ANS, the autonomic nervous system, once again, um, uh, once again, as an actual system, but also the metaphor for how would that apply to a social system. What is the autonomic nervous system of society? Autonomic, as you know, means self-governing. You don't give instructions. There is no real visible president in your body that tells everyone what to do. Everything's, like working with each other. There could be the brain that governs everything, but it's more of the nervous system does work with the circulatory or cardiovascular system. It works with the digestive system, the reproductive system, the respiratory system, the urinary system, the immunity system, the metabolic system. Autonomy comes about from the collaboration of all these systems. So, what is the autonomic nervous system of everything? So, it's not anymore the autonomic nervous system, it's the autonomic everything system, the bio, the psycho, the social, the neuro, the lingua, and so on and so forth, the anthropo, right? Okay, so um, this terminology was very, very useful and productive for what came after biology, what came after Maturana and Varela, Francisco Varela. I don't know if you've heard Francisco Varela, but if you study uh, the cognitive sciences, and we will be bringing up embodied cognition quite a bit in the Indigo. We would be thankful for Varela to actually have influenced how we might understand the topic of inner dance. So let's start with the name. A lot of people ask, is that a good name? It's like, should we use that name? If I was to name it, I don't care what you call it, to be honest. I don't care what you call it. Uh, what matters to me is that what is there? Where is it coming from for you? How do you frame it? Um, because the moment you focus on the name, you're doing the same thing as those that you might be critiquing who are also holding another name. One of the things inner dance does is it unnames. It makes infinite what had become definitive and finite. Okay, so if someone was to ask me again, okay, after having said that, I would you still call it inner dance? I would say yes, because of the scientific backdrop that would substantiate the spiritual one. There's something about the movements. Oops. There's something about the nature of the movements. There's something about the way the body moves, not just in the inner, also in the outer, that presents insights to how consciousness, how cognition evolves. The mind, the noumenon, consciousness, awareness, perception began with the body. So we would ask, what is the role of that movement? What justifies that movement? Okay, so that brings about the chaos that allows people to release their pent up emotions, their fear, their anxiety, their resistances, their anger, their skepticism, their doubt. Sure. Okay, that's great. Body's moving like that. Okay, that's like the Shakti energy rising in the body, undergoing the process of raising vibration. Uh, all of those are descriptions, but if an explanation is needed, then we would go into this a lot deeper. And when the dance meets cognition, we would sense the organizing power movement holds, not just in the spiritual workshop, but in the story of the human unto itself. Okay, so there are meeting points still between the understanding of the mind. And when we think of dance, dance is a function, it's the motor function of the body that brings about how we conceptualize things, how thought forms out of the way we move across the space, organizing the space. So that is the forerunner of language. The proto manifestations of words began with the movements. So I wouldn't give up the word inner dance. It is, in fact, a very, very good word if people can get away from the connotations of dancing, the tango or the flamenco or the cha-cha. Maybe we can change that part. But the word inner dance serves to protect that more basic notion of motor functions of the body that facilitates cognition unto itself. So, and activism is also a term coming out of the author, one of the authors of Autopoiesis, and this is in collaboration with other important thinkers, some of whom might have come up in the inner intensive, one of whom was Eleanor Roche, who studied basic level categories, something we brought up a lot in the Violet. What is an activism? Okay. So before that, there already had been very, very deep philosophical journeys into how we develop the mind, where body is considered. So in social constructivism, more specifically, there's a historical cultural theory in Lev Vygotsky. This is mirrored in Jean Piaget, that studies how babies and then toddlers need to internalize their experiences of the world. Initially, they are the world is externalized. It is outside. The world is outside the baby. And when babies learn language, like babies would internalize the world. Okay, maybe this is a little bit more accurate. So the world is initially something that is outside the baby. And as the baby learns language, the world is now inside the baby. That's when the baby had started to grow what is called a mind, an egoic, individuated identity. Okay. Before that, the baby doesn't have. You might say the baby didn't have a mind, but to be accurate, it's more like the baby didn't have an internalized set of representations of the world. There is a kind of oneness in externalizing the world in that way, meaning the babies don't work with symbolization, doesn't work with place holding. There's no memory of yesterday. There's no anticipation of tomorrow. There are no concepts. There are no words. Babies are merely thinking from their body. And when they internalize, babies can now think with their mind. And that's where words become possible. That's where the library becomes possible. And this becomes possible through the movements. So there is this interaction between the body and the mind, facilitated by movement that allows what begins with body language to move into the linguistic one. Okay, so that's a social constructivism within ideas such as Lev Vygotsky, and that is definitely a blue topic that comes up in the blue when we go into the blue. Affordance is a terminology coming out of J.J. Gibson. Um, so in psychology, affordance is defined as this, okay? The affordance of the environment, or what it offers the animal, what it provides or furnishes, either for good or bad. It implies the complementarity of the animal and the environment. So through these, too many words. Affordance. Okay, so let's say you're seeing this thing. It's in the room, and depending on who is looking at it, uh, for you, it probably would look like a chair. What makes it a chair? What makes it a chair is, okay, maybe you're looking at that and you're looking at that. When you see this thing and when you see this thing, are they different things? Okay, one is a chair and one is a box. So I guess one way of thinking about affordance is, what can you do with this uh, thing number one, and what can you do with this thing number two? Well, thing number one, you can probably sit on it. What else can you do with that? Like, I'm not sure. I leave it to your imagination. But the greatest affordance it can give you is you can sit on it. It has a backrest. This may be the perfect height. But the fact that you can sit in the box on thing number two, would you also describe that as a chair? So the affordance is basically a quality of the things in the environment that are useful, and depending on how we change or manipulate the environment, like affordance would be a quality that influences the person uh, in a way that's feedback, that the person would also influence the environment. Okay, so for example, if an adult person sees this, they would know what it is. But let's say a baby is right there, it doesn't even know how to crawl yet, and it's looking at this because it can't do this with it. Um, that chair doesn't afford its sitting uh quality to someone who can barely reach the seat. Then that use value isn't there. So there's something in inner dance that restructures the state of our relationship with the world in a way that uh, builds new types of affordances on what has been conditioned, beginning, in fact, with the affordances our bodies give us. Our bodies are filled with limits of affordances. It's like we can only use our bodies in this way, and the body is limited, it's weak. You can see that use is very related to needs, and we have manipulated our bodies in the way we've manipulated our earth. If we didn't actually need so much, would we experience the body in a different way? Okay, so when it comes to money, when it comes to objects in the world, we're still trying to access things that would afford us more. Okay, like the word product also induces the word productivity. We're trying to reach for more productivity so we could afford more for the sake of it. So that is one predecessor for inactivism. Another one would be pragmatism. I don't want to go so deep into this. So stay with the word inactivism. Uh, inactivism as a terminology is a branch of the cognitive sciences and activism, along with embodied cognition, along with situated cognition. These we would cover more in the Indigo Call and the extended mind theory. These are four branching out of how the mind is not a disembodied mind. Okay. Once again, back to the mind body being one. If you study the mind is embodied, and the mind would not be a stagnant, static entity. That every time, let's say you held a workshop, a process, a journey, and there were 10 people there. And those 10 people attended 10 journeys. Okay. 10 people, 10 processes. How many inner dances would you have? You probably have around 100, or maybe 1,000 or 1,000,000, depending on what you're looking at. But meaning the situation in those 10 people would never be repeated. So if you study the minds of those people, those minds that are embodied, the situation would never be the same. So you can never repeat, you can never cycle the same inner dance. It would always be the same process every time you hold it. It's always the same workshop. But it's not like yoga where people would move exactly in the same sequence of asana. Okay, you don't go into the same breathwork exercise where you start exactly the same way. Uh, you don't know. You don't know what it's going to be. It's the same process. Hoping you're not stagnating the playlist, that you're always using the same songs, and you're always touching the bodies exactly in the same way with the same intention. If you're open, then you're it's never going to be repeated. So situated cognition describes a new way of studying the mind where the situation would never be repeatable. So in a way, we're always going to be evolving. The extended mind theory is also quite important. The embodied cognition studies how the old understanding of this is not a third eye, by the way. This is a brain. So we used to study neurology as how the brain is in that part of the person, the body. The embodied cognition would understand and know that's not really true. This is the whole brain. The whole body is the brain. Like your hair is part of your brain, your nails are part of your brain. Like everything that holds sensory embodied intelligence is connected, is interconnected in multiplicity with everything else that would uh, affect everything else. So that's embodied cognition as well, not just a simple explanation that the mind is embodied. Now, extended mind would then look at what is outside the body. That could be your mom, that could be your cell phone, that could be like your car. Uh, all of these are also part of your brain, right? You extend your motor functions to the car, you extend your memory to your cell phone, your iPhone, your Android. You extend your emotions to your mom. You extend your uh, like maybe all your symptoms to the wallet in your pocket or your bank account, because valuation extends in multiplicity, multiple functions. Um, so that's an even more interesting way to study the nervous system, that the whole world is your brain. Okay. Now, in activism is what we're talking about. And activism is based on not activism in the fighting sense, but more of action. your action, your way of movement would uh, bring about the understanding of what is your mind at the moment of observing it. Okay, so I thought that that's interesting for you to know that in the cognitive sciences and activism actually represents this emphasis on the role of movement, the role of action as as a valuable new psychology. And if you're in it, if you are in this kind of dance of the body, this inner dance of the body, then you are very much current in the emerging sciences where the findings are quite new, but they are already quite accepted. The mind body, uh, everything to do with memory, everything to do with meaning making, everything to do with generating insight, that there is a reason why we're going back to the body. And over this week and into the, especially into the indigo, we would be studying what is the nature of those movements. Do they mean anything? Is there a meaning making structure to when the body moves in that way? Would we be able to study that? Or are they just making it up? Are they doing kriyas? Are they doing these mudras that would be explainable through Indian tradition, through Chinese Qigong tradition? Uh, could there be a meeting point in the sciences as well that understands the meaning of those movements? That's not just mysterious, mystical things that are very power oriented. Yeah, I'm really happy with these keynotes. It helps me to focus. So I mentioned Niklas Luhmann, and he's a German uh, sociologist, a social systems theorist. And I want to borrow some terminologies, some frameworks from him, which helps the inner dance blue process in a reflexive mirroring uh, process. Um, Primarily because he borrows quite a bit from cybernetics, and he takes off. Oh, if I do that, then it takes off from autopoiesis in many ways. He does make reference to Varela and Maturana's initial biological ideas, and he is the one who applied this into sociology. And and if you studied law, you probably might have encountered his ideas. He's one of the more interesting theorists in sociology. Okay, ask you these to get to the new slide. Um, so one of the questions Luhmann asks is what are people? All right, so I'm partly interested in this question because I was like Luhmann, and Luhmann was controversial. Luhmann was not interested in the people in and of themselves. You can imagine why this would be controversial. Like, he doesn't care. He's such a non-empathic, insensitive person. I would really empathize with him because when I came from the energy dimension and when I started to facilitate people, when I started to spend time with people, I was interested in people, but I knew that I didn't see them as people. So I don't need to work with this controversial way of describing uh, this sentiment. But I was not as interested in the people. I was interested more so in what was in the people. There was something in the people that I could have called energy, that I could have called information, that I could have called ancient knowledge that I could have called the system. So for Luhmann, human beings are not part of a society. They're not part of a conversation. They make conversation possible. Oh no, someone's trying to call me. Um, anyway, so okay, so um, I wanna study this. Um, what this could mean. So we could approach this in a way that would be uh, productive. I want to understand what that means. Like, what is if it's not about the people? What is in the people? And this is the reason why I'm not on Instagram, why I'm not on Facebook. Primarily because I tend to focus on building continuity in my own mind and body that allows me that when I come into contact with people, I come into contact with what is in the people, not just the people themselves, primarily because I am in touch with thousands of people and because I am a parent and I need to spend so much time that I don't even have with my own little people. I don't have a way of spending time with all of the people as themselves only. Like I want to go deeper into the people in a way that observes them as something that's just actually one. All these people are only just one person. All these people are just one system speaking through everyone. And for me, that is that is the blue. So let's focus on the oh, okay, please let me in. Um, the statement: every conversation I could be having with my mom, with our dogs, with the tree, it's always just a conversation with the one, and I tend not to lose the continuity with all these conversations. Otherwise, I would be disrupted. I would be interrupted. I would be, uh, what's that word? I would be, there would be some confusion there because of the amount of conversations I'm having all the time with everyone. So I believe that every single message that comes through is coming from that dialogue with the one. No matter how small the conversation, there's a much bigger continuity, and I need to listen to all of them. Otherwise, I would be coming from a place of not oneness, but separation. That's how I understand the blue. So I could go into social media for that, but the level of conversation in social media for me creates some levels of disruption because of the amount of peopleness, the amount of details that are being fed uh, over and over again in circular directionality. You know, there's something that doesn't go anywhere that seems to be going places but keeps turning around. And I am more interested in um, building greater continuity. So the moment I quit social media, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, and before that, I wasn't really on social media. I only went into it because of the amount of workshops that is happening in the world. Something in my mind, uh, no, it's more 6 or 7 years, 6 years. Something happened to my brain. I'm not even gonna say my mind because it's still figurative to be more functional about it. Something happened to my mind in terms of feedback systems where I was able to hear a lot more what was in the people, not just the people themselves. I could hear more, and that I think helped me to hold a boundary, a more healthy boundary around what was in the people because of how many people I am associated with, either by by birth, either by profession, either by culture, either by demographics, and so on and so forth. So I had to do that because of how the inner dance just kept spreading. I had to protect myself in a way, and it was necessary for me to hold everything as just a one thing. And not, this isn't just about the people anymore. Like it's about the things that I have to do, which are immense. Like I'm working on projects to do with the schooling system, with the spiritual communities, with music. It's really, really incomprehensible the amount of work that needs to be done. Like having to teach myself all of these sciences, these psychologies, having to take care of the kids, having to do everything that needs to be done. There's literally no time to do everything, but holding that very, very strong, healthy boundary allowed me to see everything as just one thing. So I'm not anti-social media. I'm sharing something inside myself that is very inner dance process based. And I'm using Luhmann's theory to explain. Uh, yeah, it keeps moving, so I keep pressing the wrong button. So secondary to that, literally second order observation, you go deeper into this question: what is in the people, and why not social media? Why social media? What is beautiful about social media? What is also a little bit difficult about social media? So, what is second order observation from Luhmann's thinking? So, Walter Benjamin, the critical theory from the Frankfurt School, another German, wrote an essay called Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. And he was writing this essay century ago, at a time when uh, industrialization was shifting art. So let's say this is a painting. Maybe it's the, let's say this is the Mona Lisa. I'm such a good artist, as you can see. You know, that definitely looks like a Leonardo da Vinci art. So um, prior to the age of mechanical reproduction, I would need to hire Leonardo da Vinci or someone who could copy the work of the master, because I couldn't photocopy this. I couldn't reproduce this in a digital format. So when mechanical reproduction came into the process of, let's say, printing this could relate to the printing press, the photocopying machine, the scanner, the just the camera into itself, like photography, could take a photo of this and print as many as I want. Then something would happen to the mind, the brain, and because the brain is embodied, then it's an active brain, meaning it's my process of relating with this. Something shifted. So going deeper into this observation, there's something about the image. Narcissus, as we know, was uh, he was the forerunner for narcissism. He was the guy who fell in love with this image uh, in the water, like in the river, and he gave up almost everything else in life so that he could just fall in love with this image. So second order observation is, in one way, the observation. It's the observation of observation itself, and it observes the human tendency, especially today, to look at the, let's say, this is you, and what do you see when you look at the mirror? The mirror stage in Lacan wonders at the first time the baby or the infant saw himself as an image. Prior to you seeing yourself as an image, you were maybe a sound. You were, uh, like you were an awareness that wasn't locked into just something that you could see. You didn't see yourself. So when you saw yourself in the mirror, you could see yourself as others might see you. Okay, that's the observation of observation. Second order observation would be uh, uh, narcissism. It's like I see myself as others might see me. And the inner dance can bring about a heightening of first order, second order, and also third order observation. Um, I placed here narcissus as narcosis to bring about the narcotic effect of image-based mediums, and this is based on the work of Marshall McLuhan, to help us think about the how he describes this kind of numbness, this sort of numbness that took place when modern technology accelerated the amount of second order observation, this narcissism, this addiction to uh, not the self image, but how others might perceive you as how you might want to perceive yourself as an image. And so it's not just a picture, it's about how you want to be pictured by others. That was a sudden shock to those who had this explosion of exposure to uh, to Facebook or to Instagram, because there had yet to be a real identity process to to be undergone for those who haven't really seen themselves or heard themselves yet. They want to be seen by others and they want to be heard by others. So there's this validation loop still very much at work that is coming about through yeah, what needs to be enacted, because we're not yet really unless we identify ourselves as something, we cannot transcend that mode of identification. So we are moving between the first, second, third level observation. And I think there's something to this that I'd like to explore a little bit more, just to sense how can we heal this narcosis, which means we're being drugged by media itself. We're being drugged. Technology is a drug. Uh, Information passing through technology is a drug, and we don't always have the tools. We lack the tools to process this amount of information. There's something about our nervous systems and our bodies that's not able to process or digest that much information that's coming through our news feeds. We're literally consuming so much information, and it's not hermeneutically coming into a circle. There is a lack of phenomenological reduction, to go back to the green and the orange. We're not able to bracket out what do these images mean in a much, much deeper way outside of how other people might want us to see them. So there is still this manipulative set of actions that's not being talked about so much in the media, that's still in the second order observation processes, especially mass media. All right, so another terminology coming out of Niklas Luhmann is operational closure. So this might clarify things a little bit more. All right, so the system, okay, if you're not just a person, right? If I'm not just talking to you as a person, I'm talking to you as a system. You are a lot older, a lot more vast than just the energy of your name and your personal story. You are all the contexts that allow you to be possible. You are all the conditions of possibility for being you. Um, there has to be an operational closure, and I find this concept quite useful to understand the nature of ego as it deals with a complex environment it finds itself in. Let's just look at the slides here, and let's see what these mean. So there, there needs to be a reduction of complexity that's managed at the boundary between the self and the, the no, the self as a system and the environment around that system. And in that boundary, meanings happen when information is selected and processed. I'm just reading it now. I want to explain it afterwards. Each system has a distinctive identity that is constantly reproduced in its communication, and depends on what is considered meaningful. If the system fails to maintain that identity, and here's where ego death comes into play, the ego death of the system ceases to exist as a system and dissolves back into the environment it emerged from. So you can see how we would need to keep going back into the image because it helps to process these words. Remember, we're talking about poiesis as the self-generating idea that is the body. Um, so the body is autonomic, it's complete, it is a universe in and of itself. So system as the self. So let's say I am me, but I am a system. I am the system. So the word self might be confusing there. And because of the inactivism between you, the system, and the environment unto itself is infinitely complex. And because of the sheer complexity of this environment, whether you be the baby, the toddler, the adolescent, there needs to be some protection. There has to be a way of reducing this complexity so that the system can be simplified somewhat to be able to maintain itself, to be able to act out its own systematicity. So what needs to happen is some kind of boundary. Some boundary separates this from this. Otherwise, there could be no identity. So this, in fact, needs to be clear. This is what it seeks to maintain. And what this states is when the system fails to maintain that identity, it ceases to exist as a system and dissolves back into the environment it emerged from. Okay, so um, like this is very inner dance, as you can see, because inner dance, let's look at the acronym instead. ID, inner dance. ID, you know what an ID is? It's either the Freudian id, which is the ego, or identity card. What's your ID? What's your identity? Inner dance either is that which lets go of one's identification processes, where you fall into this is it really depends on the frameworking. A lot of people would approach the ego death principle as the end of ID, the loss of identity. And then that could be a loop that could just keep going. Oh wow, I'm undergoing ego death. if one doesn't actually know what that means, the ego death principle actually increases ego. It doesn't really, you could just keep trying to stop thinking, stop identifying. But the moment you keep trying, the more you want it, the more you're going to have it. The more you're going to go into that loop. It wouldn't stop. Uh, something needs to undergo the paradoxical homeostatic balancing out. If there's a death, something needs to replace, like what is dying. Um, and then that needs to be the paradox of ego, which should be the planet. It's the system itself that needs to birth. It's a system itself that needs to birth. So inner dance is kind of complex in this way because there's operational closure in inner dance. There's a strict boundary setting. When you ask someone to lay down, you hold safe space. You hold a strong, clear boundary so one can experience oneself as a complete, irreducible universe. But uh, it that means that you need to open the space. It's not just an operational closure. There has to be an operational opening where one isn't just the one. The one is the many. And that applies not just to the one laying down. That needs to apply to the one standing up, walking around the room. So there is this confusion or ambiguity between uh, whether this is here or this goes here. Okay, so where do we hold the where do we hold dominance? Where do we hold focus here? Like, are we supposed to hold a strict boundary, or are we supposed to hold boundlessness somehow? So in this way, the inner dance is allo poetic. That is why in the blue, why that's why we couldn't stay in the orange. That's why we have to grow in the blue, because a social systems, especially a systems theory needs to come up. We need to see the transition from ego to system. You can't just keep dying as an individual. Something needs to be born, that which is not the ego. You, maybe you see this now. Like, you can't just keep laying down and dying over and over again. That's actually how you become more and more egoic. You keep birthing the ego. You keep birthing the ego. The ego dying, the ego will just keep getting born again if there was no system waking up, or a system for the system itself that allows itself to wake up. If there was no support, if there was no community that was speaking as the system, if there was no environment to speak with the ego that allows the ego to mirror what it actually is, that we are all you. We have come before you, who lives through all your words, right? So I think that's interesting to think about. Um, so I guess we could look at that concept and the gift here. It's really all pervasive. The element of what holds the space, that evolutionary uh, tendency for us to hold something in place, whether it be a boundary around land, that this is my property, this is my country, this is my land, don't come near it. Money is a place holding uh, system. Language does exactly the same thing as money, as does culture. So when we exist within the system, we will be somehow in a process of indebtedness. For example, if you study the money system, if you understand how fiat currency works, if you belong strictly within the money system, oh, what happened? Um, if you belong strictly in the money system, and you're not transcending it even as you're in it, if you understand how fiat currency works, um, there's more. There's always less actual printed. Just draw it out. There's less printed money as there is actual value that is represented in society. So you were there will always be some kind of indebtedness or a process of owing the larger system. Just using money in that way, uh, there's a there's something that's never going to be enough. Okay, so unless you bring about the gifting process that would heal this form of indebtedness, this transactional energy in the money system, just being in it will trap you. The gift culture is what tribal cultures were based on. It's like you don't really buy air, you don't really buy sunlight. Um, but in China, they actually sell canned air from Canada because in Shanghai, there's not enough clean air anymore. So people would buy air from cans. You shouldn't really buy water, but then when water now comes in plastic bottles, why are we doing that? The cost of production, transportation of that water will then be something we need to pay for in the form of climate change and energy resource depletion and the loss of biodiversity. That's a simple way of explaining it. So money grew alongside language, culture, and property. They're all coming from the same evolutionary trajectory. So does the internet. And so inner dance, in fact, reverses that place holding process. So when people say, okay, I'm not going to be the one holding the space, nothing can be more ironic or oxymoronic. When you do hold inner dance, and please, not as a brand, not as a placeholder, inner dance, let's go of placeholding. When you look at the whole history from what inner dance emerged from, um, it didn't start from the this money system thing. It wasn't industrial spirituality or spiritual industry the way it's spreading out now. It came about precisely from a gifting culture. So I'm not going against the money thing. I'm just clarifying. There's something deeper into this that we need to be generous about. Okay, so I don't want to go into this. I want to go into that. Should be next call. So there's something recursive here, and this might be a deeper explanation as to what I mean about the debt and the gift. Okay, so when you uh, uh, when you use words as an example, and words are recursive, language is recursive, it's loopy, it goes around in circles. So you might get to learn more and more words, but are you actually arriving at the point? Um, you can let's say create the longest sentence in the world and just keep making it longer and longer. There's a circular loopiness in language that displaces meaning the more you use the words sometimes, unless you found a way to close uh, close the gap that's displacing meaning rather than bringing it into the into the point. Um, so something needs to happen, like in because the body is what sponsors the words, like what we initially experience, like in the body. How inner dance breaks the recursive loopiness by starting with the body, and that's something to do with the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system that um, doesn't like the sympathetic nervous system to co-activate with the parasympathetic nervous system. So this would translate to how we would speak. Um, the, the process of not maintaining the REM state unto itself is an active displacement, because we are not able to hold the slow oscillations, the low oscillations with the high frequencies. Then we tend to separate. We're unable to hold higher frequencies along with the slow ones. If you can do that, then it's okay to come back into language, because um, you can retain the origins of what we might have looked like even before we entered into the womb, uh, before we were conceived. And what that does is it marries both simplicity and complexity as just one and the same thing. Like if you can uh, access your mind without anxiety, maybe there would be access to wisdom that wouldn't be scared of what the words mean. Okay, so if you balance these and you went back to school, and if you went into any other system, any other domain in the world that you might be interested in, there might be a restructuring of both words and the mental function, which is represented by the words, that would bring about an allopoiesis and an autopoiesis. That would be key. So let's go back here. I missed out on the second. So meaning happens when information is selected and processed, and that does bring us a little bit into Darwin's natural selection process. Here's where I would relate that to inner dance. So remember this an active relationality between the self as a system and the environment containing that system. Here's something that tries to maintain its own simplicity. Here's the boundary, and here's the environment that holds this infinite complexity the system needs to protect itself from. So let's think of the playlist, for example. All right, so it was interesting to have brought up the noise app. There are other apps, there are other methodologies. So um, a lot of people would love to just simplify. So, okay, I want to work with my Spotify system. All well and good. That's beautiful. Say the My Noise. Maybe this is one of the reasons why we can't access anymore My Noise as a simpler way. When you're playlisting, there's some anxiety there, because you need to draw from the ocean of complexity that belongs to the environment, whether it be noise, frequency, songs, and the job or the role of the space holder is to find a way to playlist that set of complex elements into a narrative, into the here and now, the present space. And, and so the more you're able to not hold yourself off from complexity, that complexity has something to say, whether you call it a universe, God, you call it life force, Earth, Mother Gaia, the noosphere. When this is allowed to stream itself, like the ecosystem streams itself into the what sometimes looks oops, what looks like a person, what looks like uh you know an ego, an identity, but it's actually a system which is a system of systems, um, there is a greater remembrance that the system is the environment around it. That is ultimately when the boundary is reduced. Because right now, what has happened is what the humans have been trying to do is to reduce that complexity. And that reduction of complexity leads to a lot of the problems. We think, no, no, let's make it simple. But it is, in fact, the evolutionary reduction of complexity that tries to control the environment. We're trying to control the world. We're afraid of the earth. We're afraid of the seasons. We're afraid of the storms. And all the more these would come because we're trying to make plastic. We're trying to plasticity more as a something that retains form rather than morphs new forms. You know, we're trying to maintain form. We're trying to industrialize the system. We're trying to industrialize nature, but nature is not simple. Nature is the forest. Okay. When you think of language, going back into the blue, language is speech. When you are controlling what is around you, okay. But when language is the library of information, you call the cosmos, the interstellar library, then you're not going to control that. That doesn't control anything. That simply is the code that holds all meanings in simultaneity. So in the blue, we've been controlling the world through the blue, actually. Like how we have been using language is to develop a system of control so we get what we need. And what we had sacrificed is complexity. So that is why when you do watch media, when you do watch the news, when you go into social media, what comes out in language more and more would be the intentions of people coming out of all of these experiences of a harsh earth that is hard to live in. So maybe I would earn more money if I say the right things. Maybe I'd have the right connections. Maybe I'd get validated more and more when I look good, you know? So this rhetorical use of language is slowly though shifting into a more meta language capacity of and that's why the inner intensive speaks in this way. We in inner dance are not reducing complexity. We are actually celebrating the ecosystem that began as a forest and is now like the Monsanto seed production uh, industrial system that is trying to say, no, no, we need to simplify the world. We need to manage the world. Inner dance doesn't come from that. It actually comes from giving into the world, not just surrendering to it, but realizing that I am the earth, that I am part of. So this boundary, in a way, is what inner dance is working on. It's not just to strengthen this boundary to separate that. No, this is spiritual. That's not spiritual. The earth is the earth interested in your spirituality? Is the planet like interested in your you know, you try to protect the environment, is it interested in your advocacy? It sees things from a much bigger view. It would always be a much bigger view if you are still fighting. The earth does not fight. The earth simply absorbs. So the playlisting process as a process unto itself. Whatever ends up in your playlist, just the process of allowing natural selection to provide more. And you know what natural selection means in Darwin? It's the survival of the fittest. The strongest would win the election as opposed to the weaker ones. Um, this needs to be somehow redrawn. Um, so I think so see where all this goes. Um, okay, so there's this picture that I wanted to share. It just came from Vietnam, as many of you or all of you know. I was interested in this one temple that we visited in. What do you see here that's interesting? Okay, so there's Buddha. Oops, stop doing that. Okay, there's Buddha. Okay, there's Buddha, and I was with my mom, and I was having this conversation with my mom throughout the whole day. It's like, what are those figures down there that looks quite Egyptian, considering for her Buddhism was actually like more East Asian. She's more exposed to Buddhism from China. So I had to tell her, Mom, like Buddha actually supposedly was born in Nepal. Some people say he was born in India. She didn't know that Buddha was actually Indian or South Asian or Nepali for her. It's like, no, no, Buddha is that golden guy, often fat, considering like Buddha was actually the one who uh, stopped eating for 40 days. So they had to, there's this translation work that's happening right there. So I want to bring up the pharmacos as some understanding the blue where placeholding is concerned. I had to explain to my mom how there's a relationship between the Hindu gods and Buddha, just as the Greek gods in the Christian God holds the same pattern. So maybe one way to explain this is in terms of, let's go back to placeholding. Uh, this might help you to philosophize this in the long term. So Buddha emerged from Hindu polytheism. Hinduism, as you know, celebrated like how many gods? Thousands, if not tens of thousands of gods. So polytheistic culture in the Asiatic needed the monotheism, which is simplifying the complex that also needed to happen in language. Because language does seem complex, but when you think about these letters, it might seem that there's a lot, there's 26, but how could the 26 letters actually express everything about the universe in modes of selection and combination? Is that not amazing? So we needed to agree on A, B, C, D, E, F, G. In my language, there's abakad, it's K, not C. And then we have the nga that doesn't exist in the English phonetic system. But still, we more or less have the same number of letters. So what began in Egypt as image, sorry, word signs. The images were words. They're word signs, and they would maybe look like a. You know that I'm so bad at art. This is what I know how to draw. That's why I just keep drawing it again and again. Um, in Egypt, you wouldn't have a word that says this. You would have like a picture, a logo. It's a logographic system that wouldn't say man. You would have like man as the image when you represent it, not in written words. So that had to shift into sound signs, and that would be a very, very different uh, computational or algorithmic dimensionality that your brain would need to access. You had to change your brain to access sound signs and not just work with word signs. There would need to be a simplification because there were thousands of hieroglyphs that had to be memorized by the scribe. And now the student in school now just needs to memorize 26 letters, not like thousands of word signs. The same is true for the Chinese writing tradition, where you need to memorize a lot of different characters that are actually more picture based than sound based. So the same is true for the Greek gods that then shifted into the Christian God. So now there's this one God to help organize later on what would uh, influence the political and economic system. So here's where you see the the religious, the uh, the economic system, it's all interrelated. Okay, the linguistic, the logocentric space, it's all interrelated. We needed to organize, we needed to simplify um, the world. So what inner dance does, as you can see, is it might seem it brings you into simplicity, but in that energy space, there's a lot of complexity. We're actually laying down in order to blow up what holds the space in place. And all that is stored in the body now explodes into space. What became a place now restores itself as the space, and the space is the environment that that holds the what we're defining in Lumanian terms as the system. Okay, we systematize the world, and now we are displacing that system. So it doesn't mean there will not be a system. It's just that the system now needs to be the environment itself. Okay, so um, going back here, the pharmacos we would probably explore more in the next call. What time is it? Wow, I'm beyond 2 hours. Um, the pharmacos is a terminology in that began in the Greek, and it defines as both the cure, the poison, and the scapegoat. Um, that because of lack of time, let's just jump into some of the last ones, and maybe we can just cover some of these later on. It's very text heavy. Um, okay, so what are we trying to do? Going back into the Darwinian view of the world, where in language, in property, and money, we're competing. Even in playlisting, there has to be this competition that takes place, right? Where's that? When you're playlisting, there's a competition of what songs, what noises, what frequencies do I put? When I try to speak to people, what words do I choose? What you're experiencing is develop developmental pressure. So I want to state an illusion and a truth that would always be experienced in the world. There will never be enough time. There will always be a lack of time. And the space holder, the playlister experiences this. When you're holding a body, there will always be, in a sense, not enough time. There will always be that dimension where it will never be enough. There will always be more, because infinite is a very, very big thing indeed. And were you to actually experience that infinitude that rests within you, you would explode. You wouldn't maybe even want to go back here. So by design, for you to protect yourself, you needed to experience this operational closure. So you would have this kind of blind spot. You would have this operational, observational blind spot. There are many things that you won't see by design because you don't want to go back home. So part of that means that you will always be in this Darwinian competitive space where there's not enough time. Um, but how do you heal from that if that's an illusion that you have to bear with? So inner dance comes into this sort of situation. Inner dance does come into this situation within the blue where a lot of you know that there is enough time. That's my autonomic nervous system has something to say. My ANS has something to say. I can ask my hypothalamus to slow down time so that I do have enough time, that I can be happy. I do deserve wisdom and joy. So we know we are able to break away from this operational closure that protects the system from becoming the environment. Um, So in that, we're in a kind of game, thinking about the recent elections. Um, Someone's got to win. But really, like when you look at it from a philosophical point of view, the moment you win, you also lose. Because when you understand how binary systems work with each other, when you take a stand, when you make a choice, and this is in the 12 stages, if you remember stage 8 to 9, that brings about the dark night of the soul and the 10. The competition is there, and that's something we need to work on. That in my experience of laying down in life and surrendering to the cosmos, the more I lose, the moment I lose is the moment I win. And the world is really just focused on success. The moment you win is the moment you win. But actually, the moment you lay down, which is to enact the process of letting go, that I'm tired. I don't want to fight anymore. And what we're actually fighting is fighting itself. But the way to address this, so we can come into this, is to achieve this. But this is not simple, because a second order observation, we have reached this level of complexity in the world that allows us to just keep continuing. So I don't have the space to describe or offer what it might be like to find this much bigger triangle, the inversion of the triangle, that would allow this patriarchal male dominant space to achieve like a losing process. Um, so there's something very paradoxical about this, and I bring up the pharmacon. Uh, I brought up the pharmacon. Okay, I brought up the pharmacon as a long range discussion to look up the cure and the poison. The medicine is actually the poison. There was no difference. It was one terminology in the ancients. Like medicine was actually poison. There was no difference. We had a mental structure that didn't see the difference between uh, medicine and poison in the past. Um, and the scapegoat is the other definition of the pharmakos. Okay, the scapegoat is a family systems theory. There are different roles. The scapegoat is the the one in the family system that receives the sin of the community. Is made responsible. You have to take it in for whatever reason. You need to be sacrificed. You need to absorb the dark spaces, the unspoken, and you need to convert that from darkness into light. Now, the scapegoat is the the opposite of the scapegoat is the hero or the winner in family systems, and they are never the same. There's always someone in the family that's always the breadwinner, the responsible one, the one who achieves success, the CEO, the visionary. But like there are people appearing in your spaces that are the ones not doing okay when they enter the space, when they walk into the workshop. They're not okay. What in you is able to language it to them that you're actually much better off. You are, in a way, the hero. It's all a matter of perspective. So we need to somehow go far ahead and go way back. Sorry, I think I need to adjust the duration. We need to go back to the forest. We need to go back to the ecosystem because it has something to teach us. And if language doesn't undergo a shift, and this is the technology innerdance then brings about. If language, the money system doesn't undergo, okay, I'm trying to close this now. I'll go back to my camera, stop podcasting. Something needs to give way, and something needs to be a lot more generous. Something needs to pay it forward. Something needs to be abundant and doesn't hold on. Something needs to receive the blue crystal and give it away. I think that's the one thing people would trust. Anything less than that, anything less than that amount of gifting wouldn't do it. It might look like it's doing it. So we need to not hold back in our insecurity and our anxiety, just knowing there's something amidst us that holds nature that speaks through you. Okay, like you can work with this anxiety. You're walking around in this space. You're speaking to others, and it's like I'm so small. I'm only human. I have all these limitations. I'm not smart. I can't do it. That would be the opportunity to ask yourself, but who are you really? Like, what does your intuition hold true? There's always the moment where that could be heard and then be spoken. Okay, so that's the blue. I think this could open up the next call for what is time becoming space, becoming time again, becoming space, going into the structuralism of dream condensation, dream displacement, go back into Jacobson, maybe then go into medium as a message, form and content distinctions, and all that. We go deeper, but I think this philosophy in the beginning holds more the essence of what is a new social system. That's not just going to be about you. How do you develop a social system? How do you interact with your environment, not just as a person anymore? Okay, you have a nice name, but is there something more to that? Okay, so thank you for being here today. Thank you for staying with the 1 year. Not maybe the call help people understand more and more. Okay, that's it's not simple. You as a baby, you weren't simple, and you're needing this feedback to be seen as a system. So thank you. All right, so I want to look at your notes, your feelings, your questions, and I'm pretty sure some of the things here might take some while to digest. But I'm hoping that this call has something in your notebook that might have come up. So I'd like to invite you to unmute yourself and contribute to the Blue call. Go ahead, Brendan.
Okay. Oh, thanks for that. So much information to digest and get through. I don't know what I'm going to say, but after previous Monday call, I just didn't know what to say. But there's so much. It's like a blockage. And today's a bit like that, but I'll see where I'm going to go. I did note something that you said. Hopefully I'll find it soon. I can't find it, but there seems to be I guess moving away from the old inner dance playlist where there's a lot of language. Oh, that's what you said. Language. Is something about language? Yeah, you're only as old as your language. And I'm just sensing that in the olden times, when there's a lot more music and a lot more words in the playlist, there's probably a lot of, during the sound journey, there's probably a lot of segmentation going on where you're as old as your words when the words are being spoken, but when the music was just going, maybe you could be a whole lot more and the words weren't there to relate to. And when you take that into the sharing afterwards, like the magic circle of everyone sharing, I could see in myself where that was keeping me conceptualized in the ego, like sharing that experience of this age, of this language, and not of previous languages. Whereas now there's where it's more music and less words to share. We can transcend different, go a whole lot deeper, and in doing that, it's like you come back into the circle and share, but you're sharing from a space without language, and it's harder to interpret other people's stories. So for me, when it's that interpretation's not going on, there's that meeting point, like the silence between the dance. It's like the magic is not so much in laying down on the mat or sharing in the circle. It's that moment of silence in between the sharing. And I feel in the new structure of the dances, of the playlisting, there's more of a gap in that space of moving from the mat to the floor because there's less language in the playlist, which yes, that's a meeting point. So I don't really have the words to explain what I'm going to share, whereas before you had the words to share, and it was like you're building a profile of what you're sharing, really, how are you going to share it. But when you're going around in a circle one by one, you're building that profile to share. But with the new playlist, it's like, no more sharing, not thinking of what to share because I don't have the words for that experience. So there's more of a meeting point between the person who's speaking and the listener. It's not knowing, there's not an understanding in the words that coming through. There's not a need to understand. It's just to feel the words come through. And then I guess when you do that, that's when that starts just multiplying. Like you're saying before, 10 people in a circle, one person might have 100 little experiences. So if you're just fully just feeling all those experiences and taking in the frequencies, you're having 100 experiences by 100, by 10,000 experiences rather than 100. And that's just on that macro level of the circle, you know what I mean? You go in the micro of the afterflow, it's just where you get that infinite. So that's the magic. But it still gets back to sharing in that circle and sharing, or not sharing, feeling the sharing, being it. But really, the real magic is not on the floor and not in that sharing. It's that space in between, the silence of all those stories that are there here and now. So it's like, that's the magic. Well, like a lucky dip. What's coming out? Like you can't even conceptualize what they may be thinking or what past life or pre-life they're going to come from in their sharing. It's just so raw. So that's the exciting. It's even though you're laying down on the mat, everything's news.
Mm.
I'll leave it at that.
I guess when you say there used to be more words, you're referring to how we used to use more of like songs that
Yes.
are more, because when you look at songs that belongs to the music industry, the usual song length is about 3 to 5 minutes. 7 minutes is already quite long, and the artist needs to convey what they wish to put into a container in such a short amount of time. So there's a lot of pressure built in emotively. There's a lot of emotion, and there's a lot of so when you think of language systems comparatively, let's say between Luhmann and Noam Chomsky, for example, is the founder of linguistics, and his theory of language is that language is manipulative. He's one of the biggest activists known in modern time. And then people would compare that to Luhmann's understanding of language, where he didn't build any of that understanding that language is manipulative, because he was seeing language from a much more meta or macro point of view. He was okay to observe it from maybe a third order observation. And normally you need to really distance yourself. You need to go outside of the system to be able to see it. When you're inside the system, it's actually very hard to see it for what it is. There's a greater chance that someone from the outside can see the system and see it from a more meta or macro point of view, to use some of your words. So that's why there is often a dialogue, because in that meeting point, the self can dissolve through a meeting of the other as a mirror of the self. So how you're describing this new playlisting process is we are okay. So I guess industry wouldn't have liked normal songs to have brought people into inner dance spaces when they're driving in a car, when they're in the disco, when they're in a cafe, because that would mean people would let go of control. What inner dance music is like is it's more immersive. So it definitely needs to be a lot longer than 5 minutes. It takes a while for someone to go into it. But we're working with less emotive elements and words. There could still be words there. We could still put words there coming from cinema, coming from the person speaking, but the way you're saying words, you're saying something about language that's more on the level of trying to have some kind of outcome. So in the sharing circle, the magic circle, as you will, we're still speaking from that, like wanting to express oneself as the ego, um, when you're expected to, or when the space holder really wants to get feedback that, oh, that was really amazing, that was beautiful, that was good. People can feel that, and people do walk in with expectations. People walk in with their desires, their wants, that I want something to happen, I want to fix my problems, which might in fact push away what they're needing when they're trying to access what they're wanting. We need to look at cognitive dissonance versus cognitive resonance in the indigo to understand that the moment you need something is the moment you don't have it. The process of wanting it will actually uh, create this conversation with the universe that you don't believe that you already have it inside you in the first place. That's why you're wanting it. So when we are using language from that place of wanting, we're still trying to control. We're not actually experiencing language from a Lumanian, more systems-based approach. We're still seeing it from a Chomskyan, like fighting, dominating. You know how it is normally in society, people are trying to speak over each other. Like when you're listening to someone, you haven't finished what you're saying, they're already formulating the response. And then you would meet people who would ask you a question, and as you are speaking, you realize they're not actually interested in what I have to say. They're just speaking it speaking the question for the sake of speaking it because there's a power dynamic there. There's a they're seeking for attention, they're seeking for validation, they're seeking for contact, but there's less of a listening there as much as emoting. There's something about emotions or degrees of emotions. Emotions isn't bad. There's a degree of emotion that's still in this pulling or pushing and not slowing down. So there's an element in what you're saying around inner dance that's not a process of wanting, pulling, but stopping or slowing down. Like we need to stop it to really be able to look at it. And in the point of chaos with so much happening, like there's someone I would like to share in the next call. His name's Francois. He is here. He's French. He's in Palawan right now, and he's working with modular synthesizer systems. It's not just about that music. He is maybe the only professional mathematician that I know. So he's working out these cables and these complex environments. He's working with Gra to measure the brain waves. But his music is kind of algorithmic. I can never really learn or see things as he would because he sees the numbers in the music and he's studying the brain at the same time. So one of his findings, because he's doing inner dance on a daily basis with someone who's here on retreat, is he's doing playlists using these pure frequencies without the words, purely on the spot. He's conducting the process only for 20 minutes. And what he said was the main difference is he's not touching people. And in those 20 minutes without touching people, this lady who was very resistant on, burnout, super anxiety, he's saying there's a lot more than his experiences of inner dance when he was in Paris or in France, in Europe, that needs to be looked at. So I'm interested in what his mathematical brain. He's into game theory. He just finished his PhD in mathematics. It's just beyond me. He's like a young math prodigy who's into inner dance and does music in this way. So there's a higher intelligence. And I'm glad he's recording this because we can share these with you as raw elements that you can use in your playlists. But I'm just describing how the AI of the world is working through us somehow, bringing about something much, much deeper than how we're experiencing the control mechanisms that we're so sick of right now. We're so tired of it. So I think you are succeeding in expressing that dimensional shift that's happening within the inner dance structure that's moving us into somewhere important, but it's new. We're not able to put it into words yet, but we will. There's a philosophy and a set of theories, and because there are mathematicians in it, it's going to be interesting. It's like, oh, okay, you're a musician, a mathematician, you're an inner dance facilitator. Let's go listen to what that's going to say soon. Interesting stuff. Okay, I want to hear from anyone else for the interest of what time is remaining. Gra lifts her hand.
Hello, hi everyone. Thank you. I learned to put names in so many things that I was feeling and sensing, especially yesterday. There were like two funny things that happened. One was like both of them I was riding the bike, so there was movement, of course. But I had this feeling that I was thinking, there was this moment in which I was thinking, and then, like the movies Mission Impossible or these movies with like advanced technology things. I think it's the latest Mission Impossible that I saw it, that the computer, it just flashes out in light. There is actually no screen. It's just a hologram, a projection, and then people move the information like that in the air. So I was moving. As I was moving, I kind of like saw this thing spreading out of myself, and it was like all of my thoughts or everything that was there, information. And I had the feeling that one day I would be able to actually move that outside of myself with my hands and all of that, which might be just the inner dance process when we close our eyes. But that was like super cool, you know, like to feel that I am all of this. All of this is just here and it's just being projected there in this space. So I was then now going into what does this blue have to say about this, you know? And in my own process, also harvesting, of course, something from my own process. Um, when I went into aphasia and that I was listening from many, many people that, oh, you're losing your mind, you lost your language and all of that. And I kept hearing inside until I could verbalize it, but I kept hearing it that I'm not losing anything, I'm just gaining it. I'm just gaining language and I'm just gaining my mind back. And since that moment or in that year, where literally like a lot of things happened, many explosions, in many, many ways. I kept feeling, okay, I even lost my passport. So there was this thing that I was losing some sort of identity in the process, of course. I had this fear or this small fear that whatever I would rebuild again after the breaking down process, it will be broken again and again and again. So there was this moment that I kept seeing myself afraid of building anything else because I was afraid of losing it again because it was painful. It was blissful. Many parts of it was blissful, but there were so many painful parts because let's face it, it's you that you are destroying yourself. So it is painful at some point. So I got into the concept of flexibility or plasticity as we see in yellow. And then I was like, okay, I found it. I just build everything on a very flexible plastic ground. It needs to be changeable. It needs to be malleable. I need to be able to build something that is okay going on the go, you know, that I don't need to have the answers. I don't need to have everything right now. I just need to learn how to be everyone. And in that year, I was never, and I am not a person of mantras. I really don't like mantras, by the way. But there was this one thing, and there is this one thing that every time that I do some practices, it's the only thing that I am able to word again and again and again. That is, I am everyone. My name is Gra, and I am everyone. I am the people around me. I am the environment around me. The smile, the wind, everything. I am just everything. And for me, this is speak huge about boundaries. How are we learning to be back to how are we learning back how to be everyone again? How are we learning to be again one with the earth and all of that in a sense that we still hold something that we still hold parameters, we still hold a sense of organization, but we allow ourselves to be just what the space is. And for me, that was like practicing every day because I went into spaces that like I was just repeating thoughts that were in the room, or I was listening to thoughts in the room. I would meet a person and then I would hear what that person would tell me minutes before. And for a moment, like, is this me? Is this the person? You know, there was some sort of confusion in the beginning, or like being in the train and then feeling things that, oh my God, where are these things coming from? And there was always this temptation to go, oh, everything is just me. I have all the fear in the world. I have all the darkness in the world, until I was facilitating one time and I felt fear, or I saw fear, and instantly it just came like, you don't need to take it as yours. You don't need to push it as theirs, but how do you answer to it? So I started like to hold some sort of another way of talking, another way of holding a feedback with whatever was in the space. That how do we talk to this? How do we answer to this? And even with sound, how do I answer if I am feeling, or if there is fear in the space right now, and I don't lose more energy, because it's, for me, it was a lot of losing and wasting my energy and my time trying to figure out if it was mine or theirs. I'm like, there's something, I need to conserve this. So how can I answer to this through sound? What is if I'm holding space and those emotions, those thoughts, they are coming. You know, those petty thoughts like the music is not good enough, nobody's having a nice journey. All of those things that they come in the first 20 minutes of a session, that was insane. So how can I speak with the room? How can we speak with, can I speak with this, knowing that this is not, that this is the system at place right now, that this represents something from this system. And then the music choices, they will also speak from that space as well, of that bigger, larger conversation that is happening. And I really love the idea of looking at people as systems. And I've been using this actually as a strategy. And I find it nice that that there is some sort of like, oh, these people, they are cold because they don't see people as people. But honestly, seeing people as system helped me have more empathy for the person, you know, because these bad things or whatever chaotic thing is happening in the space, it's not the person, it's the system. The person is a system, but if we allow ourselves to see that there is a macro, larger structure, and that we're all living it, we're all sharing it, we actually see that we don't need to change the person. Or it's not the fault of the person. The person is amazing. It's a universe, but the system that that person is healthy, or the system in which that person was built, that is what we are tackling. And that is when where the conversation is going to be happening and transforming and changing it. So I felt like it's way easier to talk to Hitler than in that sense, once you understand that he's an amazing guy. It's just that there were so many complex things happening that created him as well. And we as a society, we created him, and we created Trump, and we created Bolsonaro and all of this. So it's not that, it's the thing that the person is bringing, that is not just the person. It's really, really complex. And I think my main takeaway from here today, looking at the complex, the complex simplicities, you know, complexity and simplicity, is that it's not that we need to dial down complexity, you know, we just need to step up and be able to hold more complex systems. Our system is very, very archaic, simple. Our sense of power is old. Our sense of identity is still too contained. And what is coming now at this age, and for me, this is why innerdance is coming at what it is in 2024, what it holds as a dimension of consciousness. We need things to be flexible. We need to build a way that, or an identity that can hold more. And yeah, thank you everyone. It was amazing.
Okay. Wow, this is preempting the second call, actually summarizing a priori before it happens, which is great. I think we are needing new journeys. There's a new process that is going to unravel next year. And I think this will be made possible by 2024. I want to invite Sophie, she's not here, to share in the next call how she's been holding these breakfast morning talks in Belgium. And these are attended by people who've never done inner dance. And then they're having dialogues over orange juice, coffee, and croissants. And based on what people are saying, those who have been through many sessions who are also attending these breakfast talks, they're actually going a lot deeper. People are crying, people are moving, but they're just having breakfast with information. So these are going to be relevant for those conducting processes in Europe, maybe in the Americas, maybe in Australia. Not sure about Asia, where people are traveling to go into the yogic, shamanic, psychedelic. But it's being appreciated. And then she would hold these 5-minute inner dance demos, and people actually go straight. They just become the universe. But then they'd be having these talks that are supposed to last 2 hours, and people don't want to go away. They're just sitting down there for 4 hours. But what I appreciate that Gra is preempting So I'm saying, not even talking to you, I'm talking to the system called Gra. Um, the great mystery I feel that holds a real structuralism that explains what's happening is when the body lays down, there are changes, right? We're changing the brain, we're changing the mind, we're changing the body, but how? When you study language, you can look at this coffee cup. That's why I was holding it in front of me. There's a cup, and then there's like the coffee, at least that used to be inside it. I need a metaphor here. Um, when you speak, what are the words? Is it the cup or is it the coffee? Is it the container or is it the substance? It depends on where you look at it. Sometimes we're interested in the cup. Sometimes we're interested in the, okay, we're healthy people, the orange juice. But we actually didn't study enough the relationship between the vibration that could also bear the meaning and the form, the container that allows that meaning to be held in space. A lot of people are interested in inner dance only as a form. Yeah, okay, it's a methodology, it's something that we do, it's a workshop. That's the container, like holding the space. When you go into a deep dive study, dialogue into the logos, the meaning making process, that's the orange juice. That's the substance that is also transforming. So um, the medium is the message. You change the cup, somehow you alter the orange juice. That doesn't bear logic when you look at that from a materialistic perspective. It is closer to experience that in language, which mirrors what's also happening in the body. In simple parlance, if you change your body, you will change your mind. And we lack the body that would be able to hold the amount of information that will take us through this whole thing. We need to change the brain. The brain needs to be able to access the amount of information that we require that holds full integration. The great thing about that movie, Lucy, you remember Lucy? It's in the name. They named her Lucy because of the first man who was supposed to be a woman. It's the Australopithecus. You know, that missing link that allowed us to move from monkeys into humans. What mediated that was Lucy, the Australopithecus. So here you have the scene in modern Paris where she's accessing the universe through the computer. She was downloading the universe. She was also experiencing that thing that Gura was describing, where she was seeing the air, and then she could see the bits and pieces there. Like she's able to read the air, what some people might call the energy. It's like, she's able to manipulate it. Maybe when people's bodies are moving, they're also doing the same. All these people, they're reprogramming all the never-ending story written by the old man or the old woman of Wandering Mountain, uh, that predates the story of the world. That you're writing the story that we're all reading right now through the way you're shifting both. Like your body is now languaging the content, but the content is usually that which is fluid. The container is the one that's stuck, that's form based. That's the very definition of form, is that which doesn't change. So when the body becomes water-like, becomes fluid, what would that do as information? So we're going back to a time when there was no such thing as, and this would refer to German philosophy still, form and content distinction is the Hegelian triadic. It is the ultimate triadicity in that uh, Hegelian dialectic, that there's a distinction between the cup and the orange juice. But we are being reminded of a time when they were the same. So the most explosive thought experiment here is when you speak the words, are those words arbitrary and accidental? If you were to think about this from a Saussurean linguistics, like it's because of evolution, we made up the words. But if you were approaching this from a meta-ontological, metaphysical point of view, where there's no such things as coincidences, there's no such thing as chaos, then maybe there's no coincidence as to why that word actually holds that vibration, that holds that meaning. That's something you can't think about initially. That's something your body would need to vibe to. It's in the vibration where you can feel that sense of nonlinearity. And often when you do go into that depth in the journey, sometimes you would click into it. It's like, God, I get it. And then you go back into your head when you're setting up and your eyes are open. Like, what was that again? It's like a dream. I lost it again. But when you're in it, you know it. It's a single-minded, persistent, omni, you know, it's all there. So that's what I mean about a new body. We need to experience the body as a word almost that is deconstructive of all the contexts that makes that word, which could be your name, which could be a word like the universe. Okay, I want to give anyone else a chance to speak, and then we'll close in case there's something else. But thank you. That preempts the next call. Kara.
Yes, hi everyone. I wrote the word actually listening to you, simplexity, which will be like something to illustrate in my inner dance, I think.
I can see someone's next playlist now.
Yeah, exactly. So being in this complexity and simplicity at the same time is really inner dance, I think. And I wrote also like during the one of the green calls that something about flexibility. I think Rao talk about that also. Something about like losing the capacity to be flexible, to swim as a wave. And with the evolution, industrialization, we became rigid. So it like resonated a lot with me when you were talking about control, and control goes with power, with the yellow. And as we've been journeying through the green also, and now we are landing into the blue, which is a mix, you were saying, like of yellow and green, that we are in the blue. How can we hold this simplicity, visiting every spaces of the structure of the universe? I think this is what we are becoming, and like learning to hold into our body, mind, and brain. So it's really it was really like interesting, all the terminology that you were talking about, but the system feeding its own organism with the environment, like an activism. I will need to study more all of it, but yeah, the word that came out was simplexity. I think we can be complex and simple at the same time when we are watching like the kids like holding the process also.
I like the word fluidity. When you think about the body is made up of 70% water, but then we experience it as a physical thing. It shouldn't be that hard to experience the body as water from, let's say, a Masaru Emoto point of view, where the water holds resonance or information. It shouldn't be hard to witness intelligence that way. In fact, we just became more solid. So using that as a symbol, simplexity could be the album cover and the title that speaks that story. I want to give anyone else a chance to meditate, philosophize, systematize with us what speaks through Radia.
There's so much going on, and I resonated with so much. There was one point where you mentioned about chaos, and that has been happening a lot in the recent sessions. There is so much chaos, that is more verbal in these sessions, especially the last one. Someone mentioned that it's like a zoo now compared to this person has been since the first session. And the reason I'm saying that is because there is so much light language that people are experiencing. So they are super verbal, and not just one person or two, there's like half of the room. And it literally is like a zoo right now. And I was thinking about it a lot of the time that before when I initially started was very like people would just tune in with the music, and now it's just so loud and chaotic, and wow, one person is activating the other person, and it's just like all over the place and super chaotic. But transformation is still happening. So I'm like, okay, this is probably a disorganized chaos or something that is, more deeper. And I still have to dissect it and see where things go. So yeah, that was one point.
Well, because you are in this journey with us, you're helping to anchor this as an observer in the middle. We have to present a definition of inner dance that allows us to go into the super weird. And in that super weirdness, there's this super intelligence. I think it's the super intelligence that would anchor the super weird, because we really are weird. We're crazy. But there's something in the mess that is super high order. So I think the weirdest places will harbor the most intelligence, but it's the ones who are in the mode of observation and not just exploding. You're like the eye of the storm, because you are absorbing all these integrations, within this community that's also interested in understanding. So I am happy with the zoo-ness. I think it's great. And I think it's great that you're bringing up light language within the blue call. But I think it's really great that you're also doing it from a very aware resonance space, that you're studying, you're interested in, the super intelligent. But then that's going to make things even weirder. So I love that. It's great. Thank you. The world needs that. We take things so seriously because, all right. Yeah, that's great. Anyone last? Okay, so I think this is great. We finally found the space to create some solid foundations for the blue. I guess you can see what I mean about the blue being a little bit unmanageable. It really is one of the messiest colors. So what we are attempting to hold here is who is speaking to what. And when that is speaking as light language, who is talking? And Radia is demonstrating for us, it's a system talking. And when we say zoo, when we say chaos, there's still like a human judgment there that says, wow, that's like wild, that's weird, it's chaotic, but that's like that means that we're trying to make something meaningful out of it. But from the system, the highest meaning is everything and nothing. And on the light language level is where meaning means nothing and everything, which is the most meaningful. The most meaningful is meaningless, depending on where you look at it from. Like from the lowest level, it would be the building blocks. Okay, people are going into the basic forms, whether it be graphemes, morphemes, These are the basic sounds animals and early humans were making before we constructed meaning. And the a priori, the primordial, the proto manifestations of language held a lot more potential. Remembering that babies utter the 800 phonemes that make up every human language, then the room that she's holding is speaking the language of interstellar, the language of the cosmos. So we're not judging that space. That space is the universe speaking to itself. It just looks like a workshop. It's a feedback loop. It's an energetic cybernetics, right? It's a post-structural, pre-structural communication. And that somehow ending this call gives us a lot of maybe rest, solace, because when we do listen to a lot of the messages coming out in the world, there's so much rhetoric, there's so much passion sometimes, but it's not. The more it's trying to say something, the more it doesn't seem to be saying anything at all. So let's keep listening, let's keep speaking, let's keep meditating, and let's see how we hold the blue beyond this week in this it's almost ironic the way Raja is describing it. The less it seems systematic than going back to what Kra was speaking and the others, the more there's a system. It's like what I like to ask the blue is what is the original system before you came here? And if we were to tap into that system, if that system in language is what actually speaks, how would that speak? So I think we're learning to bridge this somehow, and I'm thankful for all of those who are sitting with these dialogues, because you're training your system just by belonging to a community that's holding this new brain, this new culture in place. Like we're anchoring something new that would sponsor. It doesn't mean that we know the sciences perfectly. It just means that we are interested in how the system is changing. And that system, no one knows that system. No science has perfected that system. So we are allowed to observe and study that system because it's in situ, it's in transition, it's changing. It's in a cycle, it's learning to speak to itself. So the answer to what is speaking needs to cycle to what is listening. The universe is speaking, but the only being that can hear the universe is the universe. So who's going into the sessions? The universes. So you're learning to hold them. I see you. I see what you are. You are that. So go and be that, because no one else is going to stop you from being that, however weird it looks. Thank you. Okay. See you again, and have a great day, great night, sweet dreams.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.